Hey guys, Mrs. Levenseller here, and today we are going to begin Unit 1. We're going to talk about 1.1 algebraic expressions. Before you write this down, take the overview of Unit 1 that Mrs. Levenseller has for you and glue it in your notebook. So it gives you a table of contents, and then you can start your notes on the next page to keep us organized. Okay, so the learning target we're going to start with is I can identify part of an expression. So first let's talk about, I should say parts of an expression. First let's talk about what an expression is. So an expression is a group of terms. Those expressions and terms will be made up of numbers, operations, and variables. Operations meaning add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Okay. An expression does not contain an equal sign or an inequality sign. Okay. So there's no comparison of two things. An expression would just be like one side of an equation is all we're going to start with. Okay. So when you think about expressions, remember that we're not solving them ever. We can just simplify or evaluate expressions. There's nothing to solve if there's no equal sign or inequality sign. Okay. So if variables are part of expressions, we want to define a variable. So that's the next word to write down there. And if at any point I'm going too fast, just pause the video and write down the definition or an example for yourself. It doesn't have to be word for word, okay? So the next word is variable. It's a letter that represents a number we do not know yet. So usually I might refer to this as a letter that represents an unknown quantity. Okay. That's why we often need to solve for that, because we want to know what it is. All right. So an expression is built up of partly of variables, and a variable is a letter that represents an unknown quantity. All right. Every variable has a value. Just to drive that home. Okay, the next word we have is coefficient. A coefficient is the number in front of the variable. It can be positive or negative. And that might take on the form of looking like addition or subtraction when it's part of an expression. Okay. So variable is the letter. Coefficient is the number in front of that letter. And then constant is a number with no variable attached. Okay. So just a plain old number. Hopefully these words are a little bit familiar to you from your days in 8th grade. And then term is the next word here. So a term of an expression can be just a single number. So it could be just a constant, like, I don't know, plus 5 at the end. That might be the term. It's just a piece of the expression. And a single variable may potentially be a term, may count as a term. Let's see. Oh, geez. So you might just see x. Or the product, and that's a really important word, right? Product. What does product mean? Product is the answer to multiplication, right? So the product of a number or a coefficient and a variable. Right? So maybe that looks like 7x. Okay. So any of those things could be considered terms. Again, they could be in the form of a positive or a negative, so the sign doesn't matter. Could be a fraction, could be a decimal, rational or irrational. Those pieces don't matter. but it's going to be made up of constants, variables, and variables with coefficients. It could have one of those things, or it could have multiple of those things, but it has to have at least one to be considered an expression. Okay, so an expression is made up of terms, and those terms will either be a constant, a variable, or a variable and a coefficient. Okay, so let's look at an example. This here is an expression. Okay, each of the terms is separated by addition or subtraction. So the terms are 2k, 15, m, well, we could say negative m, negative 3, positive n, and negative 7p. Okay. Anytime you're looking at a term, if you want to know whether it's positive or negative, you look at the sign in front of the term. Okay. So this means that we're joining that term with the sign. So that's negative 7p. All right. Whereas plus 15 means that's a positive 15. That term is positive. Okay. The different variables that we can spot there are the next thing we want to pick out. So variables are just the letters. So I see K, M, N, and P. K, M, N, and P. We're just picking out the variables. We're not necessarily looking for any signs or coefficients yet. The coefficients are the numbers in front of the variables. So I'll start with the first one, 2k. Well, the number in front of that variable k is 2, so 2 is considered a coefficient. All right. Then we get to negative m. All right. So negative m is, there's no real number in front that you see, but if you see just a negative sign there, we're assuming there's a negative 1. So negative 1 is the coefficient. Similarly with positive n over here, there's no number in front, so I'm assuming there's a 1 there, so positive 1. And then lastly, negative 7p, the coefficient is negative 7. Okay, so those are all my coefficients. Usually we refer to them in correlation with the variable they came from. Here we're just listing them. And then constants. So the constants are the values, the numbers that have no variables attached. So in this case, we have 15 and negative 3. 15 is a constant, negative 3 is a constant. All right, so that's just identifying, and this is going to help us when we start to solve equations. We have to be able to break down all those pieces. So pause the video and see if you can try the problems on the right-hand side. And then I'll write out the answers to them so you have that. So pause the video and then come back and see if you got the same answers as I did. And then we'll talk about combining like terms. So if you're back, take a second, look at the answers to that second one, and make sure you have the same thing. And now we're going to move on down here. So here's an expression where all of these terms have been put together. So 8y, negative 7, 2y. We're reading this as 8y minus 7 plus 2y. They've circled different parts, and we want to label those. So here, the 8, that would be called a coefficient because it's the number in front of the variable. Y, it's a different color here. Y is going to be the variable that we're dealing with. And negative 7, has no variable attached to it, so that is going to be the constant term. All right. So constants have no variable, the variables will be the letter, and the number in front is the coefficient. All right. It's asking next how many terms are present in this expression. Well, each term is separated by addition and subtraction. So I see one term here, the second term is in the middle, and the third term at the end. So there are 3 terms, 8y, -7, and 2y. Okay. Again, please pause the video, see if you can do the same thing with number 2. I'll write out the answers. As you do that, come back and check in a second. All right. So check your answers with number 2. If you have questions, make sure you ask Mrs. Levenseller in class.